What do Indigenous people look like? Has anyone ever said, you don't look Indigenous when you are? Or maybe you've met someone who's Native and were immediately shocked because they didn't look how you expected. Today's video is all about what being Indigenous looks like, how most people judge what Indigenous is by what they see in front of them, and how to actually deal with these Indigenous stereotypes that exist. And that's what we're going to be talking about in today's new video. Hi there, I'm Mallory. Welcome back to the Tribal Trade channel, where we share new videos every single week about smudging, Indigenous culture, Native teachings, and more. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so that you never miss a video. Whenever I'm asked on social media why I don't look very Indigenous, I always follow up this question with, what do Indigenous people look like to you? What we're describing right now is identity of what is Indigenous. Understand how we currently judge who Indigenous people are and where we get these ideas and where they come from. This is so important because a lot of these ideas are just based on stereotypes. This is a problem because these stereotypes are often outdated, incorrect, and they're affecting how people understand who Indigenous people are, and make it really difficult for both Native people and Indigenous allies to have positive conversations around Indigenous identity. To solve this problem, I've created 5 important steps for how to avoid judging what is Indigenous. After you follow these 5 steps, you'll not only understand why you have these stereotypes in your head, but how you'll be able to think about Indigenous people in a more updated, current, and realistic way that will make you much more confident when you interact with someone who may be Indigenous. Now let's get into these 5 important steps for how to avoid judging what is Indigenous. The first step for how to avoid judging what is Indigenous is understand what judgment means in the first place. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is judging what is Indigenous by appearance or by associating them with stereotypes. Judgment means making decisions and coming to conclusions about what people's identities are or what things mean to them. So having an opinion about something or someone based just on the evidence that is in front of them. Identifying anything in our lives requires us to use our pre-exposed ideas and assumptions to things in order to recognize what it is that is in front of us. Our brains naturally associate what we see and what we are exposed to with previous experiences. These learned experiences tell us to understand and categorize what we are surrounded by. Judgment and having opinions about things isn't horrible, but it's important to consider how exactly you're forming your judgments or your understandings and how they maybe could be inaccurate, and how in any situation the judgment could be offensive or harmful to the person that you're communicating with. Now that you understand what judgment is, how can we avoid judging what is Indigenous by appearance or associations? Now, the second step for how to avoid judging what is Indigenous is to think about who is affected by this. It's not just Indigenous people. Non-Indigenous people are also greatly affected by these judgments and racially profiling others. And sometimes it's unfortunately our own Indigenous people judging ourselves. A lot of times it's our own people who are racially profiling ourselves because of the generational trauma that we have all experienced. Personally, I've experienced more of our own Indigenous people feeling the need to screen out and create exclusivity within Indigenous communities. Turning against each other is something that often happens and is a result of those generational traumas. So where does this judgment happen? A lot of different situations, a lot of different scenarios and places. Some of these places are workplaces, sports, youth extracurricular activities, social media, schools. These are just some examples of where these judgments can happen, whether it's an all Indigenous place or a mixture or anywhere. Let me know in the comments if you've seen any other examples of where you've seen these judgments happen. Do you have any advice on how we can avoid these judgments? Let me know in the comments below. The third step for avoiding judging what is Indigenous is to understand why people judge in the first place. I love asking the question of why things happen. So why do people judge in the first place? I've tried to list out some of the common reasons that people judge in general. That way it doesn't have any power over us, and we can understand and not have this foreign thing that doesn't make sense, and we can try to learn to be better. One of the most common reasons that people judge is it helps the judger feel superior. If someone is not feeling good enough or feeling bad about themselves, it helps them to feel better. Judgment also helps us recognize our goals and where we fit in the world. We all know that when we feel disconnected sometimes, we feel this inherent need to have a place, to feel a connection, to feel like we belong somewhere, even if we know that we don't belong over there. So judgment happens naturally. When this does happen though, we can understand why these reasons exist and why we're judging others in general, not just Indigenous people or our own people, but it helps us to understand why and how we can overcome it. Another reason that people judge is it uncovers our own faulty qualities. When we identify faulty qualities or things that we think aren't great in other people, we identify them so that we feel not alone with our own faults. Now, that's a common thing that I've experienced personally on Instagram, for example. Someone will identify something that they don't necessarily like about me or a judgment about me, and when I reach out to them and respond to them, usually it's something that they actually feel about themselves too. And that is when they eventually open up about it. It's a very, very interesting thing to me. That's another common reason why people judge. Another reason is it helps us feel connected to others through a common interest or shared feelings or any type of commonality. An example of this is if we complain about something with other people in our family or friends, it can sometimes form a bond. That's why I think people complain sometimes, is because it helps them find a common ground and they feel a sense of connection, even if it's a negative activity that they're doing. With Indigenous people specifically, I've seen in many cases of feeling disconnected or feeling not Indigenous enough themselves, and that hurt feeling makes them try to make other people feel the same way too, so that they can justify the way that they feel themselves. So that's why people judge. Some of the really common reasons, so that way we can learn to overcome them. Now on to the fourth step in avoiding judging what is Indigenous, which is realizing the consequences if you don't fix this judgment problem. What can this problem of judgment lead to? It can lead to you just feeling bad. If you're judging other people or people that you care about, your children, your employees, your coworkers, people in your life that are judging others, not just you, it doesn't feel good. When you're judging someone else, you cannot possibly feel good about it. Another consequence of this is that you could be potentially damaging opportunities or relationships with other people because you're creating a negative interaction with them. Even if it's just in your head and it's a negative association, a negative interaction with the person is going to be a consequence of you not fixing the problem around judgment. The fifth step to take to avoid judging what is Indigenous is to learn about the diversity of Indigenous people. So learn the diversity that exists in our communities, in our tribes, and in our culture. There's not just one culture. There's not just one set of teachings. There's not just one way of doing things. I can't stress that enough. It all starts with learning and education. Another thing here, which is really, really important, is the second part of this solution, which is acknowledge your assumptive stereotypes that are basing your judgments. Acknowledge what your stereotypes are from the beginning. I'm going to tell you why this is such a powerful solution. Acknowledging your stereotypes is important because when you acknowledge something and the way that you think about something already, it takes away the power. It doesn't have any power any longer, and any of the weight associated with it is removed because you're acknowledging it and it's making not as big of a deal and separates you from that assumption. It allows you to see the assumptions objectively as well. It gives you a powerful reflection on your environment. So if you're noticing that some of your stereotypes are very dark, you can then begin to reflect on why those assumptions and why those stereotypes exist. Maybe it has something to do with your environment or your beliefs or stereotypes you have in your head or in your family or friends, or where you form your ideas from. If you're interested in more content and more resources on Indigenous culture, you can check out our website at tribaltradeco.com to learn more. So there you have it. Now you know how to use these 5 simple yet important steps on how to avoid judging what is Indigenous and what you can do to overcome some of these assumptions and some of these stereotypes that might be hindering some of your relationships with Indigenous people, with Indigenous allies, and with the entire Indigenous community. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and we'll see you next time.